Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
You know what they say about judging a book by its cover? Well, I spent 7 years believing I was the most predictable story on the shelf. Trinity Evans, head librarian at Grand Rapids Public Library, cardigan collector, and professional shusher. But sometimes the quietest stories hide the wildest chapters. And mine was about to be rewritten entirely. Let me paint you a picture of who I used to be. Every morning at 7:30 a.m. sharp, I'd unlock the heavy oak doors of our century-old library. The scent of aged paper and leather bindings would wash over me like a familiar embrace. My world was organized, categorized, and color-coded. Dewey Decimal System wasn't just my job, it was my religion. Fiction on the left, nonfiction on the right, and everything in its perfect place. My uniform never varied, sensible flats, knee-length skirts in muted tones, and those damn cardigans. God, I had 17 of them. Beige, gray, navy blue, a rainbow of repression, as I now realize. My auburn hair was always pulled back in a tight bun, secured with enough bobby pins to set off a metal detector. I thought I looked professional. Looking back, I looked terrified. Gregory had been in my life for 3 years. 3 years of Saturday dinners at chain restaurants, 3 years of his condescending comments about my cute little book job, and 3 years of me convincing myself that stability meant happiness. He worked in finance, drove a sensible sedan, and had opinions about everything, especially my career. Trinity, when are you going to get serious about your future? He'd say, cutting his steak with mechanical precision. Libraries are dying. You need to think about something more ... substantial. I'd nod and smile, pushing around the salad I'd ordered because he said I was getting a little soft around the middle. That was Gregory, death by 1,000 paper cuts, each comment designed to make me smaller, quieter, more manageable. But that Tuesday morning in October changed everything. That's when she walked in. I was shelving returns when I heard her voice for the first time. Rich, melodic, with a laugh that seemed to bubble up from somewhere deep and genuine. I peered around the corner of the poetry section. Yes, poetry, because even then something in me was drawn to beauty, and saw her. Kylie Martinez stood at the information desk, her dark hair cascading in loose waves over her shoulders. She wore paint-splattered jeans and a vintage band tie-shirt that hugged her curves in ways that made my cheeks burn. Her skin was kissed by the sun, and when she smiled at my colleague Janet, dimples appeared that could have inspired sonnets. And looking for books on public art installations, she was saying something about community engagement through creative expression. Her voice carried the kind of passion that made you lean in closer. I found myself abandoning my cart and drifting toward the desk, drawn like a moth to flame. Oh, Trinity would be perfect for this, Janet chirped, waving me over. She knows our art section better than anyone. Suddenly, I was face to face with the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Her eyes were the color of warm honey, flecked with gold that seemed to dance in the afternoon light streaming through our tall windows. When she looked at me, really looked at me, I felt seen in a way that was both terrifying and exhilarating. Trinity, she repeated, as if testing how my name felt on her tongue. I'm Kylie. I'm working on a proposal for an art installation downtown, and I need some research on how public art affects community dynamics. I should have simply directed her to the appropriate section. That's what the old Trinity would have done. Instead, I heard myself saying, I'd love to help you find exactly what you need. The next hour flew by in a blur of book recommendations. An animated conversation. Kylie's passion for her work was infectious. She talked about art as a living, breathing thing that could transform spaces and hearts alike. Her hands moved as she spoke, painting pictures in the air, and I found myself mesmerized by the graceful way her fingers danced. Art shouldn't be locked away in galleries, she said, leaning against the table where we'd spread out a dozen books. It should be in the streets and libraries, in places where real people live their real lives. I nodded, though I'd never thought about art that way before. My world was about preservation, protection, keeping things safe behind glass and velvet. Ropes. Kylie's world was about setting beauty free. You know, she said, studying my face with those golden eyes, you have really interesting bone structure. Has anyone ever told you that? Heat flooded my cheeks. I know, no one's ever said that. Well, they should have. She tilted her head, and I felt like a butterfly pinned to a board, beautiful and exposed. You'd make a fascinating subject for a portrait. I stammered something about needing to get back to work, but she was already writing her phone number on a scrap of paper. Call me if you think of any other resources, she said, pressing the paper into my palm. Her fingers lingered against mine for just a moment too long. Or if you'd like to see some of my work sometime. After she left, I stood there holding that piece of paper like it might burst into flames. The neat handwriting seemed to pulse. With possibility, I tucked it into my cardigan pocket, where it burned against my ribs for the rest of the day. That evening, Gregory took me to our usual restaurant, a sterile chain place with laminated menus and fluorescent lighting that made everything look sick and pale. He was in rare form, ranting about his latest promotion and the incompetence of his colleagues. And then Davidson had the nerve to suggest I wasn't being collaborative enough. He was saying, sawing at his overcooked chicken, collaborative, as if excellence needs a committee. I pushed lettuce around my plate and thought about honey-colored eyes and paint-stained fingers. About art that lived and breathed and transformed. About being called fascinating. Are you even listening to me, Trinity? I looked up to find Gregory's pale blue eyes boring into me with irritation. Sorry, just tired from work. Right, your work. He rolled his eyes. Speaking of which, when are you going to apply for that administrative position at the school district? Better hours, better pay, and you'd be doing something that actually matters. I like my job, Gregory. You stock books, Trinity. A computer. Could do what you do. Something twisted in my chest. I help people find information. I connect them with stories and knowledge, and you're 32 years old, he interrupted. Time to grow up. I excused myself to the bathroom and locked myself in a stall, pulling out Kylie's number. Before I could lose my nerve, I typed out a text. Hi, this is Trinity from the library. I'd love to see your work sometime. The response came almost immediately. Tomorrow? There's a beer festival downtown with local artists displaying their work. Meet me at 6. My heart hammered against my ribs. I'd never been to a beer festival. I didn't even drink beer. The old Trinity would have made an excuse, would have tucked her phone away and returned to Gregory's monotonous monologue about market projections. Instead, I typed back, I'll be there. The next evening, I stood in front of my closet in a state of panic. My wardrobe was a monument to mediocrity, rows of neutral tone professional wear and weekend clothes that screamed suburban. Moan. Finally, I settled on dark jeans and a soft green sweater that brought out my eyes. I left my hair down for the first time in years, letting the auburn waves frame my face. The beer festival was a revelation. The downtown park had been transformed into a wonderland of color and creativity. Local artists had set up booths showcasing everything from paintings to sculptures to textile work. The air hummed with music and laughter and the kind of energy that comes from people celebrating what they love. I found Kylie at a booth displaying her paintings, and my breath caught in my throat. Her work was extraordinary, bold, vibrant, pieces that seemed to capture the very essence of human emotion. One piece in particular drew me in, a woman's silhouette dissolving into butterflies, as if she was transforming before my very eyes. That's called metamorphosis, Kylie said, appearing beside me with 2 beer cups in hand. It's about becoming who you're meant to be. She handed me a cup of something golden and citrusy. I took a sip and felt the alcohol warm my chest, loosening. Something that had been wound tight for too long. It's beautiful, I said, studying the painting. She looks free. Freedom's a choice, Kylie said, moving closer. Sometimes a scary one. We spent the evening wandering from booth to booth, Kylie introducing me to artists and musicians and writers. People who had chosen passion over security, creativity over convention. They welcomed me into their conversations with warmth and curiosity, asking about my work at the library with genuine interest. A librarian, exclaimed a potter named Marcus. That's amazing. Libraries are sacred spaces, keepers of human knowledge and imagination. For the first time in years, I felt proud of what I did. Not defensive, not apologetic, proud. As the night wore on, I found myself relaxing in ways I hadn't in years. The beer helped, but it was more than that. It was Kylie's laugh, the way she threw her head back without self-consciousness. It was the way she touched my arm when she talked casual and natural. It was the way she looked at me like I was interesting, worth knowing. Come on, she said as the festival began winding down. I want to show you something. She led me to a quieter corner of the park where an old gazebo stood surrounded by oak trees. String lights had been wrapped around the pillars, casting everything in a warm, golden glow. "This is where I come to think," she said, settling onto the steps. "There's something magical about this place." I sat beside her, close enough to catch the scent of her perfume, something warm and spicy that made me think of summer nights and secret gardens. "Tell me about yourself, Trinity," she said, turning to face me. "The real you, not the librarian version." I opened my mouth to give her the usual safe answers: work, Gregory, my quiet little life. Instead, I found myself talking about things I'd buried for years. My childhood dreams of being a writer, my love of poetry that I'd hidden, like a shameful secret, the way I sometimes danced alone in my apartment to music that made my soul ache with longing. "You're not what I expected," Kylie said softly when I finally fell silent. "What did you expect?" "Someone quieter, more contained." She reached out and touched my hair, tucking a strand behind my ear. "But you're not contained at all, are you? You're just waiting." Her fingers lingered against my cheek, and I felt something inside me crack open like an egg. All the careful walls I'd built, all the ways I'd made myself smaller and safer, began to crumble. "Kylie," I whispered, not even sure what I was asking for. She leaned closer, and I could see flecks of green in her golden eyes. "Can I kiss you, Trinity?" I should have said no. Should have thought about Gregory, about my reputation, about all the reasons this was complicated and dangerous and wrong. Instead, I said yes. Her lips were soft and warm, tasting of beer and possibility. The kiss was gentle at first, questioning. But when I responded, when I let myself melt into her, it deepened into something that made my toes curl in my sensible shoes. When we finally broke apart, I was breathless and dizzy and more alive than I'd felt in years. "Oh," I managed, touching my lips. "Goodo or bado?" Kylie asked, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth. "Good, definitely good. Just thought unexpected." She laughed, and the sound wrapped around me like sunshine. The best things usually are. I floated home that night, Gregory's text going unanswered on my phone. For the first time in my adult life, I looked in the mirror and saw someone worth knowing. My hair was mussed, my lips still pink from Kylie's kisses, and my eyes sparkled with something I thought I'd lost forever: hope. The next few weeks passed in a blur of stolen moments and secret meetings. Kylie would come to the library during my lunch breaks, and we'd find quiet corners to talk and laugh and steal quick kisses between the stacks. She'd text me photos of her work in progress, and I'd send her poems I found that reminded me of her. I was changing, and everyone could see it. My clothes got a little brighter, my hair a little looser. I started wearing lip gloss and painting my nails. Small rebellions that felt like tiny victories. "You look different," Janet commented one afternoon. "Happy. It's nice to see." But Gregory noticed too, and he didn't like what he saw. "What's gotten into you lately?" he demanded over dinner at our usual spot. "You're acting strange." "Strange how?" He gestured vaguely. More talkative, more animated. "It's like you're trying to be someone you're not." The irony wasn't lost on me. For the first time in years, I was trying to be exactly who I was. The breaking point came 3 weeks after that first kiss. Kylie had proposed a collaborative art project for the library, a community initiative that would combine visual art with literary works, turning our stuffy old building into a living gallery. I was over the moon about it, already imagining poetry readings and art exhibitions, and all the ways we could bring creativity to our community. I made the mistake of mentioning it to Gregory. "Are you insane?" He exploded, his face turning an alarming shade of red. "You want to turn the library into some kind of hippie art commune?" "It's called community engagement, Gregory. It's what libraries are supposed to do. Libraries are supposed to be quiet places where people read books. Not whatever this is." He was pacing now, his hands clenched into fists. "Who even gave you this ridiculous idea?" I hesitated too long, and his eyes narrowed with suspicion. "There's someone else, isn't there?" His voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "You're having an affair. Gregory, don't lie to me." "Trinity, I can see it all over your face." "Who is he? It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is." I stood there in that sterile restaurant, looking at this man I'd spent 3 years of my life with, and realized I felt nothing for him. No love, no attraction, not even nostalgia, just nothing. "You're right," I said quietly. There's someone else. His face went white, then red, then white again. I knew it. I knew you were too good to be true. Sneaking around behind my back like some comment. Don't, I said, standing up. Don't you dare. I gave you 3 years of my life, Trinity. 3 years of dinners and dates and putting up with your little book obsession. And this is how you repay me? Putting up with my book obsession? I felt something cold and hard settle in my chest. You mean my career? My passion? The thing that gives my life meaning? Your job is stamping books, Trinity. Don't make it sound more important than it is. That's when I knew. Knew that I was done being small for him, done apologizing for who I was, done pretending that his vision of my life was the one I wanted to live. We're done, Gregory. You can't be serious. You're going to throw away everything we have for some fling, what we have. I looked around at the ugly restaurant with its fluorescent lights and plastic flowers. What exactly do we have? You don't love me. You love the idea of me, quiet, manageable, grateful Trinity who doesn't ask for too much or dream too big. That's not, you're right about one thing, though. I am having an affair. With myself. With the person I used to be before I let you convince me I wasn't enough. I walked out of that restaurant and never looked back. The next morning, I called in sick to work for the first time in 7 years and drove to Kylie's art studio. It was in an old warehouse district, the kind of neighborhood Gregory would have called sketchy, but that I found vibrantly alive. Her studio was on the 3rd floor, a massive space with exposed brick walls and huge windows that let in floods of natural light. When she opened the door, still in paint-covered overalls, and with her hair twisted up in a messy bun, I burst into tears. Hey, she said, pulling me inside and wrapping me in her arms. What happened? Between sobs, I told her everything. About Gregory, about the fight, about the terrible realization that I'd been living someone else's life for years. I'm so sorry, I hiccuped against her shoulder. I'm such a mess. You're not a mess, she said, stroking my hair. You're brave. Do you know how much courage it takes to walk away from something safe for something real? She made me tea and wrapped me in a paint-splattered blanket while I cried out 3 years of suppressed emotions. When I finally calmed down, she showed me around her studio. It was like stepping into another world. Canvases lined the walls, some finished, others in various stages of completion. Brushes and palettes and tubes of paint covered every surface. In one corner sat a potter's wheel, in another, collection of sculptures made from found objects. It was chaotic and beautiful and alive in ways that made my chest ache with longing. This is what passion looks like, I said, turning in a slow circle. This is what freedom looks like, Kylie corrected. And you can have it too if you want it. I don't know how. Start small. She picked up a canvas and set it on an easel. Paint something, anything. Don't think about whether it's good or right or proper. Just ... feel. I'd never painted before, never even held a brush. But with Kylie guiding my hands, I found myself mixing colors on the palette, deep blues and vibrant purples, and shots of gold that reminded me of her eyes. The painting that emerged was abstract, emotional, swirls of color that seemed to dance and breathe on the canvas. It was nothing like the controlled, organized world I'd lived in for so long. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely beautiful. It's awful, I said, stepping back to look at it. It's honest, Kylie said, and that makes it perfect. We spent the rest of the day in her studio. She taught me about color theory and brush techniques, but more than that, she taught me about letting go, about trusting myself to create something without knowing what it would become. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself relaxing in ways I never had before. Paint smudged my clothes and hands, my hair fell out of its careful style, and I didn't care. For the first time in my adult life, I was focused entirely on the present moment, on the feel of the brush in my hand, and the way the colors blended and separated on the canvas. You're a natural, Kylie said, coming up behind me to watch me. Work on my second painting. Her hand settled on my shoulders, warm and steady. I feel like I'm finding myself, I murmured, adding a stroke of crimson to the swirl of blues. Maybe you're not finding yourself, she said softly. Maybe you're creating yourself. I turned in her arms, paintbrush still in hand, and looked into those honey gold eyes that had started this whole transformation. Kiss me, I said. This kiss was different from our first, hungrier, more desperate. We were both covered in paint, both breathing hard, both dizzy with the intoxication of creation and connection. When we broke apart, We were laughing at the rainbow of colors we transferred to each other's skin. "We're a mess," I said, looking down at my paint-stained sweater. "We're masterpieces," she corrected and kissed me again. That's when she led me to the corner of the studio where she kept a small daybed for late-night painting sessions. That's when I discovered that making love could be just like making art, messy and beautiful and transformative. That's when I learned the difference between having sex and making love, between being wanted and being cherished. In Kylie's arms, with paint still wet on my fingers and sunshine streaming through those huge windows, I finally understood what all those poets had been writing about. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of change and growth. I threw myself into planning the library's art initiative with a passion that surprised everyone, including myself. We organized poetry readings and painting workshops, installed rotating art exhibits, and turned our dusty old community room into a vibrant creative space. The response from the community was overwhelming. Families came to the children's art classes, teenagers attended the spoken word nights, and seniors shared stories that inspired murals and sculptures. Our quiet little library became the beating heart of Grand Rapids' art scene. But success always comes with a price. Gregory, it turned out, didn't take rejection well. When he realized I wasn't coming back, when he saw the changes I was making in my life and work, he decided to exact his revenge. It started with phone calls to my supervisor, complaining about the inappropriate activities happening at the library. Then came the letters to the city council, questioning whether taxpayer money should fund frivolous art projects. Finally, he escalated to social media, posting about the radical transformation of our public institutions and how concerned citizens should take back their community spaces. The worst part was the personal attacks. He somehow found out about Kylie, probably through his network of finance brothers who seemed to know everyone in the city, and began spreading rumors about my lifestyle choices and moral character. Trinity Evans has turned our family-friendly library into a den of moral corruption, read one of his Facebook posts. Our children deserve better than to be exposed to this agenda. I won't lie, it hurt. Not because I cared what Gregory thought, but because I could see the doubt creeping into some of my colleagues' eyes. Janet still supported me, but others began questioning whether the art program was appropriate for a public institution. The breaking point came when Gregory showed up at the library during one of our evening poetry readings. He didn't come alone. He brought a small group of like-minded individuals, all clutching printed copies of his social media posts and demanding to speak to my supervisor. I was in the middle of introducing a local poet when the commotion started. Gregory's voice, raised and angry, carried from the front desk into our community room. I could see people turning in their seats, confusion and concern replacing the warm anticipation that had filled the space moments before. "Excuse me," I said into the microphone, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're having a small disruption, but we'll continue in just a moment." I walked out to the main floor to find Gregory red-faced and gesticulating at poor Janet, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. "This has gone too far, Trinity," he said when he saw me. "You've turned this place into a circus." "I've turned it into a community space," I replied calmly. "Which is exactly what it's supposed to be. Community space." He laughed bitterly. "You mean propaganda center? Everyone knows what this is really about, you and your girlfriend. Pushing your lifestyle on impressionable kids." The room went dead silent. I could feel the eyes of every patron, every artist, every person who had supported our programs watching to see how I would respond. For a moment, I felt the familiar urge to shrink, to apologize, to make myself smaller to avoid conflict. The old Trinity would have stammered excuses and tried to diffuse the situation with placating words. But I wasn't the old Trinity anymore. "You're absolutely right, Gregory," I said, my voice carrying clearly through the suddenly quiet library. "This is exactly what it's about. It's about living authentically. It's about celebrating creativity and diversity and all the beautiful ways humans express themselves. It's about love, love for art, love for community, and yes, love for the person who helped me remember who I really am." I could see Kylie in the doorway of the community room, her face shining with pride and support. That gave me the courage to continue. "If you find that threatening, that's your choice. But I won't apologize for creating a space where people feel welcome to be themselves, to explore their creativity, to connect with others who share their passions. That's not propaganda. That's what libraries have always been about." The silence stretched for a long moment. Then slowly applause began. It started with one person, then another, then the entire room erupted in supportive clapping and cheers. Even some of the people Gregory had brought with him looked uncomfortable with his harsh rhetoric. "This isn't over," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. He looked around at the faces surrounding him, faces full of joy and creativity and community, and seemed to realize how small and bitter he appeared in comparison. After he left, the poetry reading continued with even more energy than before. People shared pieces about authenticity, about finding their voice, about the courage to live openly. It was one of the most powerful evenings we'd ever had. Later, as we cleaned up the community room, Kylie pulled me aside. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "Not just for standing up to him, but for standing up for who you are." "I couldn't have done it without you," I said. "Without this." I gestured around the room, now hung with local artwork and filled with folding chairs arranged in the intimate circles we used for our events. "You did it long before you met me," she said. "I just helped you remember." The next few months flew by in a blur of activity and growth. Our art program not only survived Gregory's attacks, but thrived because of them. The community rallied around us, defending the library and the creative programming we'd worked so hard to build. Local media picked up the story, framing it as a battle between narrow-mindedness and inclusive community building. We received grants to expand our programming, partnering with local schools to offer after-school art classes and collaborating with the community college to provide continuing education workshops. The library became a model for other cities, looking to revitalize their public spaces through arts integration. More importantly, I continued to grow and change. I started writing again, poetry at first, then short stories exploring themes of identity and transformation. Kylie encouraged me to submit to literary magazines, and to my amazement, some of my work was accepted for publication. I cut my hair into a shorter, more modern style, and upgraded my wardrobe with Kylie's help. Gone were the beige cardigans and sensible shoes, replaced by clothes that actually reflected my personality, flowing scarves and jewelry that caught the light, boots with a little heel, dresses in jewel tones that made my auburn hair glow. But the biggest change was internal. I learned to trust my instincts, to speak up for what I believed in, to take up space without apologizing. I learned that passion wasn't something to be embarrassed about, but something to be celebrated. 6 months after that first kiss in the gazebo, Kylie asked me to move in with her. Her studio had a small apartment above it, nothing fancy, but filled with light and creativity and the kind of bohemian charm I'd never allowed myself to enjoy. "Are you sure?" I asked, though my heart was already singing with possibility. "It's a big step." "Trinity," she said, taking my hands in hers. "I've watched you transform from a woman who was afraid of her own shadow into someone who stands up in front of rooms full of people and inspires them to be brave. I've seen you discover talents you didn't know you had and fight for things you believe in. I've fallen in love with every version of you I've met, and I can't wait to see who you become next." Moving in together felt like the most natural thing in the world. We turned the apartment into a perfect blend of our two worlds, my books mingling with her art supplies, my love of order-creating systems that helped her chaos become more productive. We painted the walls in colors that made us happy and hung our favorite pieces, some of hers, some created together, some by other local artists we befriended. Our life together fell into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortable. Mornings began with coffee on the fire escape that served as our balcony, watching the city wake up while we planned our days. Evenings often found us working side by side in the studio, me writing while she painted, sharing ideas and inspiration and the comfortable silence of two people completely at ease with each other. The library continued to flourish under our joint influence. Kylie officially became our artist in residence, a position we created specifically for her. She taught classes, curated exhibitions, and helped other artists connect with our community. Together, we developed programming that no one had ever attempted before, book clubs that inspired art projects, poetry slams accompanied by live painting, storytelling events where the audience helped create collaborative murals. One evening, about a year after we'd first met, I was putting the finishing touches on a display of local authors when Kylie appeared with a bottle of champagne and a mysterious smile. "What's this for?" I asked, accepting the glass she offered. "We got it," she said, barely able to contain her excitement. "Got what?" "The grant. The big one." The State Arts Council approved our proposal for the Regional Arts and Literacy Initiative. We're going to be the flagship library for the entire program. I set down my champagne and stared at her. Are you serious? Dead serious. 20 libraries across 3 counties, all implementing versions of our programming. Training workshops, resource sharing, a traveling exhibition program, everything we dreamed about. I threw my arms around her, hardly able to believe it. What had started as a small experiment in community engagement had grown into something that would impact thousands of people across the region. There's more, she said when I finally released her. They want us to co-author the training manual. Your expertise in library science combined with my artistic background. They said it was exactly the kind of innovative partnership they were looking for. We're going to write a book together. We're going to change how people think about public spaces, about the role of creativity in community building, about what's possible when you combine passion with purpose. That night, we celebrated on the roof of our building, looking out over the city that had become our canvas. The lights twinkled like stars, and somewhere in the distance, music drifted from one of the clubs downtown. It was the kind of night that makes you believe in magic, in transformation, in the power of love to change everything. Do you ever miss it? Kylie asked, settling against my side. The old life, the certainty. I thought about Gregory's predictable dinners in my beige cardigans and the careful small life I'd constructed. Never, I said, not for a single second. Even when things get hard, when people like Gregory try to tear down what we've built, especially then, I turned to face her, this woman who had helped me discover myself. You know what I realized? The old me wasn't certain about anything. She was just too scared to admit it. This life, this love, this work we're doing, it might be uncertain, but it's real. It's mine. And that makes all the difference. She kissed me then, soft and sweet under the starlit sky, and I tasted promise on her lips. Promise of more adventures, more challenges, more growth, more love. The following months brought their own set of challenges and triumphs. The regional program launch required countless hours of preparation, travel to other libraries, and the delicate work of helping traditional institutions embrace change. Some librarians were immediately excited about the possibilities. Others needed more convincing. I found myself becoming something I'd never expected, a teacher, a mentor, a leader in my field. The shy woman who used to hide behind book carts was now giving presentations at conferences, leading workshops, and inspiring other librarians to think differently about their role in the community. You're a natural at this, said Dr. Patricia Williams, the state librarian, after watching me lead a training session. Have you ever considered pursuing your doctorate? We could use more people like you in library school faculty positions. The suggestion planted a seed that grew over the following weeks. Teaching, research, the opportunity to influence the next generation of librarians, it was a path I'd never imagined for myself, but one that excited me more each time I considered it. Kylie was completely supportive when I brought up the idea. You should absolutely do it, she said without hesitation. You have so much to offer, so much wisdom to share. It would mean a few years of school, probably some time apart when I need to attend residencies or conferences. So, we'll figure it out. Great love adapts Trinity. It doesn't hold each other back, it helps each other soar. 2 years later, I found myself enrolled in a doctoral program in library and information science, specializing in community engagement and arts integration. It was challenging, exhilarating, and sometimes overwhelming, but it felt like the natural next step in a journey that had begun with a simple question about public art installations. My dissertation research focused on the measurable impacts of arts programming in public libraries, everything from increased circulation and community engagement to improve literacy rates and social cohesion. But beyond the statistics and academic jargon, what I was really documenting was transformation. The way creativity changes people, the way art builds bridges, the way libraries can become catalysts for community renewal. Kylie's work continued to evolve as well. Her art had gained recognition beyond our local community, with pieces showing in galleries across the state. But she never lost sight of her commitment to accessible, community-based art. She developed a mobile studio program, bringing art supplies and instruction to underserved neighborhoods, senior centers, and schools with limited resources. Art isn't a luxury, she would tell her students. It's a necessity. It's how we process our experiences, connect with each other, and imagine better futures. Watching her work with kids who had never held a paintbrush, seeing elderly people rediscover creativity they thought they'd lost, witnessing the joy on faces when someone creates something beautiful with their own hands, it reminded me daily why we'd chosen this path. Our personal relationship deepened alongside our professional partnership. We learned to navigate the challenges of working together while maintaining the romance and intimacy that had brought us together. Some days, we were colleagues, brainstorming and problem solving. Other days, we were artists, inspiring and challenging each other creatively. And always, we were lovers, finding in each other a home that neither of us had known we were looking for. 3 years after that first kiss, Kylie surprised me with a proposal that was perfectly, uniquely us. I was working late in the library, preparing for a major exhibition opening when she appeared in the poetry section with a canvas under her arm. "I have something to show you," she said, her eyes bright with nervous excitement. She turned the canvas around, and I gasped. It was a painting of the two of us, not realistic, but impressionistic, full of swirling colors and movement. We were dancing, our bodies intertwined, surrounded by books that had grown wings and were flying around us like butterflies. At the bottom, in elegant script, were the words, "Will you marry me, Kylie?" I breathed, tears already starting to fall. "I know it's not traditional," she said quickly, "but nothing about us has been traditional. I wanted to ask you in the place where we first met, surrounded by all the stories that brought us together." I launched myself into her arms, nearly knocking over a display of Emily Dickinson poetry in the process. "Yes," I said against her lips. "Yes, yes, 1,000 times yes." Our wedding was naturally unconventional. We held it in the library's community room, surrounded by the art and books that had shaped our love story. I wore a dress in deep emerald green, my favorite color now, so different from the beige and gray of my old life. Kylie wore a vintage suit with paint-splattered shoes that made me laugh every time I looked at them. Instead of traditional vows, we read pieces we'd written for each other, me a poem about transformation and finding home in another person, her a letter about the day she first saw me and knew her life was about to change. There wasn't a dry eye in the house, including our own. The reception was a celebration of community in the truest sense. Local musicians performed, artists had created installations throughout the building, and guests participated in a collaborative mural that we still display in the library's main hall. It was messy and beautiful and perfect, everything our life together had become. Gregory, I learned through mutual acquaintances, had moved to another city shortly after our confrontation. Apparently, his campaign against the library had backfired spectacularly, earning him a reputation as a narrow-minded troublemaker that affected his standing in the business community. I felt no satisfaction in his downfall, only a kind of distant pity for someone so threatened by other people's happiness that he devoted energy to trying to destroy it. But that was the past, and we were firmly focused on the future. Our doctoral studies were progressing well. I was nearing completion of my dissertation, and Kylie had been accepted into an MFA program that would complement her community art work with advanced training in arts education and therapy. The library had become everything we dreamed it could be and more. Our programming had expanded to include not just visual arts and literature, but music, theater, dance, and digital media. We hosted maker spaces where people learned everything, from 3D printing to traditional bookbinding. Our teen program had developed into a youth arts council that advised other libraries on engaging young people through creative programming. Most importantly, we'd proven that transformation was possible for institutions, for communities, and for individuals. Every day brought new examples of lives changed through the arts programming we'd pioneered. The shy teenager who discovered her voice through spoken word poetry. The retired businessman who found new purpose teaching woodworking to at-risk youth. The single mother who built confidence and community through our women's writing circle. One evening, as we walked home from a particularly successful community art fair, Kylie took my hand and squeezed it gently. "Do you remember what you said that first night at the beer festival?" she asked. "About feeling like you were living someone else's life." I thought back to that version of myself, the woman in the sensible cardigan who thought passion was something other people experienced. "I barely recognize her anymore," I said. "But you should thank her," Kylie said. "She was brave enough to text me back. She was brave enough to show up." She was right. That scared, suppressed version of myself had taken the first small step that led to everything else. Maybe she hadn't been as lost as I thought. Maybe she'd been waiting all along for permission to become who she really was. As we climbed the stairs to our apartment, I caught a reflection in the hallway mirror. Two women, hands intertwined, faces flushed with happiness and purpose. My hair was streaked with premature silver now, a sign of the stress and growth of the past few years, but my eyes were bright with the kind of contentment I'd never thought possible. "What are you thinking about?" Kylie asked, following my gaze to the mirror. "Just all of it. How different everything is." "How different I am. You're not different," she said, unlocking her door. "You're just more yourself." That night, as we lay in bed in our paint-splattered apartment above the art studio, surrounded by books and canvases and the beautiful chaos of a life fully lived, I thought about the journey that had brought me here. From the conservative librarian, who shushed people and hid behind cardigans, to the woman who now stood in front of audiences and talked about the transformative power of creativity and community.